The Jedi Order had a fatal weakness, because there were simply too few of them. 10,000 knights stood as the only defense for a galaxy of quintillions, which was a mathematical impossibility. Imagine if the Jedi had chosen a different path, where they cloned themselves instead of hiring a bounty hunter. This single decision would have created an unstoppable army, but it also would have released a darkness the galaxy was never meant to survive.
We must look at the reality of the prequel era to understand why this scenario changes everything. The available Star Wars lore reveals terrifying numbers where the Jedi Order consisted of roughly 10,000 active members. They were peacekeepers rather than soldiers, yet they were responsible for protecting a republic that spanned thousands of star systems. The Jedi were stretched to their limit when the Separatist crisis began because they could not be everywhere at once. A single Jedi Master might be sent to settle a dispute on a planet with billions of inhabitants, making it a losing battle from the start. The Jedi needed an army, but their philosophy forbade them from raising one from the general population, so they needed warriors ready to fight from birth. Jedi Master Sifo-Dyas foresaw the coming war and knew the Jedi would fall if they did not adapt. He was killed in the original timeline, and his project was taken by Count Dooku, who chose Jango Fett as the template. Sifo-Dyas survives long enough to make a different choice in this scenario, because he realizes that regular soldiers fighting battle droids creates a war of attrition. He needs quality over quantity to win quickly, so he offers his own genetic material to the Kaminoans. He plans an army of Force users who possess the reflexes and power of a Jedi Master, combined with the obedience of a soldier, which seems like the perfect solution. You can help us keep the archives complete by hitting the subscribe button if you want to see more alternate timelines in Star Wars lore. It only takes a second to join us before we continue this theory to see if the Kaminoans can actually succeed. Cloning a Jedi is significantly harder than cloning a bounty hunter, because replicating a high Midi-chlorian count is nearly impossible. The Empire spent decades trying to clone Palpatine, where most attempts ended in failure or twisted abominations. The Kaminoan scientists would face a significant challenge, since a direct clone of a Jedi often results in a diminishing return, where the connection to the Force degrades. We must assume the Kaminoans found a solution for this scenario to work, possibly using a binding agent similar to the role Omega played in the Emperor's experiments. They managed to stabilize the genome and create 10,000 viable embryos from Sifo-Dyas' blood, making the project a success. The clones of Jango Fett were aged at twice the normal rate, so a 10-year-old clone had the body of a 20-year-old man. This acceleration presents a dangerous problem for a Jedi clone, because training takes decades of emotional maturity and deep meditation to control the Force. These clones would lack that luxury as they are grown in tanks and fed knowledge through flash training programs before receiving lightsabers. Thousands of beings with the power of a Jedi Knight but the emotional intelligence of a child would be incredibly volatile. The Council would view this army with absolute terror rather than pride. The Clone Wars begin at Geonosis, where 200 Jedi were originally surrounded and nearly slaughtered by droids. The reinforcements look very different in this version, as gunships descend and thousands of robed figures jump out to ignite their lightsabers. The ensuing conflict is a massacre rather than a battle, as hundreds of droids are lifted into the air and crushed, while blaster bolts are deflected in a wall of light. The Separatist leaders watching from the balcony would freeze in horror, because General Grievous and Count Dooku would have no counter to an army of Force users. The war might have ended that very day, because the power imbalance is too great for the droid army to overcome. Chancellor Palpatine orchestrated the Clone Wars to exhaust the Jedi and surround them with soldiers who would eventually kill them. An army of Jedi clones ruins this plan, because he cannot simply issue Order 66 if the soldiers are Jedi who would sense his dark intent. Palpatine cannot physically fight 20,000 Force users at once, even as a skilled manipulator, so he would have to change his strategy entirely. He would stop trying to destroy the Jedi from the outside and start corrupting them from the inside, since these clones are vulnerable targets for the dark side. The Jedi Code teaches that a Jedi uses the Force for knowledge and defense, rather than attack. But these clones were created in a lab solely to be weapons. This creates a significant internal conflict, because they are told to be peacekeepers, yet they know only war. They see the natural Jedi living lives of study and contemplation, while they are sent to the front lines to die, causing resentment to build. The clones begin to see themselves as superior,
because they are the ones doing the fighting. They would question why they should take orders from the old council members sitting in the temple. Anakin Skywalker would take this development harder than anyone, because his entire identity is built on being the Chosen One and the most powerful Jedi of his generation. He is suddenly surrounded by thousands of beings who are nearly as strong as he is, meaning he is no longer unique. His insecurity would rise significantly as Palpatine whispers that the Council is trying to replace him with these clones. Palpatine would claim the clones are an insult to true Jedi, causing Anakin to hate the clone army. He would distance himself from them and move closer to Palpatine and the dark side much faster than before. Cloning a Jedi often led to madness in old legends because the mind fractured under the pressure of the Force, and this side effect begins to show as the war continues. The Jedi clones start to lose control and stop distinguishing between droids and civilians, while their use of the Force becomes aggressive. They start using the dark side because it is easier and fueled by the emotion and passion that these undisciplined clones possess. Reports start coming in from the Outer Rim of Jedi clones burning down entire villages to catch a single separatist, turning the supposed heroes into villains. Yoda and Mace Windu would realize their mistake too late after thinking they could control this army. They would try to recall the Jedi clones to Coruscant for rehabilitation and meditation, but teaching patience to a being grown in a jar in 6 months is impossible. The clones would view this recall as a betrayal by weak old men trying to take away their power. Palpatine takes advantage of this moment because he does not need an inhibitor chip to turn them. He only needs to give them permission to be what they are. Palpatine issues Order 66 by broadcasting it to the galaxy rather than just the clones. He declares the Jedi Council enemies of the state and calls upon his loyal Jedi army to restore order, prompting the corrupted clones to march on the Jedi Temple. This battle becomes a war of lightsabers, with 10,000 natural Jedi against 20,000 younger and faster clones. The temple burns as the sky over Coruscant lights up with the flashes of green and blue blades in the most destructive battle in the history of the Force. The natural Jedi fight with discipline, but are overwhelmed by the intensity of the attack. The Empire rises in the terrifying aftermath, policed by dark Jedi rather than stormtroopers. Rebellion becomes impossible because every planet has a garrison of Force users who can read minds. Fugitives cannot run from soldiers capable of pulling ships out of the sky with their thoughts, meaning the Rebel Alliance never stands a chance. The Death Star is never built because the soldiers themselves serve as the ultimate weapon on every street corner. Palpatine sits on his throne as a god, ruling over a collection of lesser demons. This dark empire has a limited lifespan because the madness that plagues cloned Force users progressively worsens. The clone Jedi would eventually turn on each other since darkside users naturally crave power and cannot share it, which is why the rule of two exists. The clone army would fracture into warlord factions without a common enemy, and civil wars would erupt between battalions. Palpatine would find himself ruling a galaxy of chaotic warlords as the stability he craved dissolves into anarchy. The galaxy would not be crushed by tyranny, but destroyed by constant conflict until there is nothing left to rule. This scenario reveals why the Jedi never attempted to clone themselves, even when facing destruction. It was wisdom rather than just a lack of technology, because the Jedi understood that the Force is a living thing and not a product. Forcing it into a laboratory setting breaks the fundamental laws of nature. The Jedi lost the war and their lives by relying on regular clones, but they would have lost their souls by cloning themselves. They would have become the evil they fought against, making extinction a better fate than becoming a plague upon the galaxy. The choices heroes make define the Star Wars galaxy. The decision to use a clone army started the Jedi's downfall, but a clone army of Force users would have destroyed everyone. Power without restraint is a curse rather than a gift, proving that sometimes the slow path is the only one worth taking. Hit like and subscribe for more if you enjoyed this look into the archives.